We got a new sponsor. Today's episode is sponsored by Precision Fuel and Hydration. If you want to get out there and figure out exactly what kind of precision that you can find in your nutrition needs around training and obviously racing, from electrolyte count to carbs per hour and many other things, even sweat testing, make sure to check out Precision Fuel and Hydration. If you want to get 15% off all of their products, you can do that with the special code STUPID15. There's also some links in the show notes below where you can hop on their website. I believe it's even for free that you can jump on and get some recommendations based on like your sweat test results and things like that to figure out what kind of carb intake and electrolyte intake you need for different types of races and different types of humidity and all that fun stuff. So thank you again so much to Precision Fuel and Hydration for sponsoring today's episode. How's it going, everybody? And welcome to this next edition of the Stupid Questions podcast. Today, we're going to be talking with a really exciting guest, Andy Blow. He is the founder and CEO, or co-founder and CEO of Precision Fuel and Hydration, based out of the UK. They've obviously been making a splash for many years in the triathlon world. And today, I get to talk a little bit about Andy, who he is on a fundamental level, his kids, his family, some of the past history he has in working in Formula One with Human Performance Labs, and just a neat guy. Awesome conversation. We had to keep it right at an hour because he had a time commitment, but it is jam-packed with awesome stuff. So please check it out. And yeah, I guess without further ado, here's Andy Blow. First things first, where are you from? Where are you at right now, actually?
I'm in the UK. I'm on the south coast in Christchurch, Dorset,
Okay, nice. Where did you grow up?
in Leicestershire, which is in the Midlands. So
Okay.
a couple of 100 miles north of here,
Yeah, so you've been in the UK pretty much born and raised?
fully. Yeah,
Yeah,
through and through.
good deal, good
What
deal.
about yourself?
So I'm based outside of Chattanooga, Tennessee by about 25 minutes, so East
Got it.
Coast. Yep. I was born and
Yeah,
raised in and around the East, in South, North Carolina, Tennessee, some Kentucky. Yeah.
nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll be in Nashville soon, actually, for Major League Baseball winter meetings. So not too far from you, I don't think.
Major League Baseball winter meetings. So for someone who has
Yeah.
no idea what that means, what is that?
So all of the Major League Baseball teams, the support staff, the athletic trainers, the sports scientists, the strength and conditioning coaches, the medics, they have a big um, industry conference every year, which is always the first week of December. It
Okay.
moves around the US, and this year it happens to be in Nashville. And if you're an approved vendor for them,
Okay.
which we are, then we sell into about 22 of the Major League Baseball teams. So
Okay.
we go along to talk to our points of contact in the team, start to do deals for the following season, all that
Okay.
kind of good stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It sounds like you're super busy. How many hours a week do you think you're working these days?
Couldn't tell you a lot.
Yeah,
Yeah,
for sure. Good deal.
if you can give me an extra day, that'd be really, I could do with a day just to tag on the end.
Yeah, for sure. Well, when I can stop the sun and pause the stars from moving, I'll call you
Yeah,
up and let you know. Good deal. Well, Andy, thank you again so much for coming on. It's awesome, an honor to have you on. One question I'd like to usually start the podcast with is a little bit of a third person one. I ask you, who is Andy?
who is Andy? Good question. I don't. Sorry, it's just frozen. Are you still there?
Yeah, I'm here. I
I
can.
just come back.
Yeah,
Got it.
yeah.
Yeah. So who is Andy? I these days I'm a dad first, a husband, business owner. I was an athlete. I kind of still am an athlete, but not a serious athlete anymore. I suppose that's how I'd identify myself.
Yeah, for sure. So you said you grew up in the UK. Do you have siblings in there that you're living with as well?
Yeah, yeah. I've got a brother 3 years younger than me.
Okay, nice. Are you guys pretty
Yeah,
close?
very close. Yeah,
Yeah.
he works with me now as well. So
Oh, nice.
he's part of the company. Yeah.
Yeah. How long has he been a part of the company since inception, or?
No, since July this year, so not very long at all, a few months. But
Oh,
my brother Dave is very creatively gifted. He does photography, videography, graphics,
yeah.
and lots of other things. Also, very good sort of He studied product design, and he's very handy. He can make things,
Yeah.
so he has a really diverse skill set. And as the business is growing, Dave and I have worked together on little projects over the years. While he's had a varied career working in. He worked in Formula One car racing as a model maker for the wind tunnels,
Oh, that's
and
sick.
he's been a freelancer when it comes to sort of videography and graphics and that
Yeah.
kind of thing. He's been involved in the design department and marketing department of a school, and he's a qualified
Yeah.
educator. But all the time, he's always done projects with me because I've been involved in or run a couple of businesses,
Yeah.
and he's tended to lend a creative hand. And as Precision Fuel and Hydration has grown as a business, he's done more and more to the point where actually it made
It
sense for
makes
everyone
sense.
for him to jump aboard and
Yeah.
get on the ship.
Yeah, for sure. So what kind of life did you live growing up? What was your family situation like? Like, give me some of the experiences.
I guess like pretty, if there's ever such a thing, quite thankfully normal, really.
Yeah.
Yeah, two siblings, mum and dad. Grew up in the Midlands. I certainly played football, soccer as a
Mm-hmm.
kid growing up. We were not super sporty family, but very active and very sporty. Mum and dad very supportive of
Yeah.
all of that.
Yeah.
Went, kind of normal schooling, nothing fancy. Kind of came out of school with decent, um, higher end grades and decent, like decent exam results, all that kind of stuff,
Yeah.
but not nothing exceptional.
Yeah.
But when I was growing up, for whatever reason, I don't really know why, I got really passionately into endurance sports. And
Yeah.
kind of after I fizzled out of playing football seriously in my early teens and got into endurance sports, running, cycling, swimming, triathlon.
Yeah.
And then that for me then just became a real kind of passion that drove a lot of other decisions that I made. I wanted to like pursue that as an athlete. I wanted to work in sport. I wanted to study sport, and that's kind of how I
Yeah.
got started on the journey.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm curious, do you have a point in time when you remember that like started to become a real focus? Was it like middle school or what they call it, grade school there? Or...
Yeah, probably started. I remember that when I was doing my A levels, which is probably that's like age 16, 17, 18, that kind of age group. The school, there were two of us who were pretty serious athletes, and the school recognised it and actually gave us time off during the day to go and ride our bikes and do proper training and
Wow.
that kind of thing. And at that point, I was definitely starting to take my sport reasonably seriously.
Yeah.
I was not competing at an international level or anything at that point. I was very much so like trying to climb the ranks, and probably was getting in amongst things on a national level, but
Yeah.
not really excelling. It was when I went to university that I had the opportunity to really indulge the sport close to full time.
Yeah, for sure. So I know a lot of just from experience in the past, friends, family members have struggled quite a bit with, you move from what we call high school into college, and everyone's asking you, what are you going to do in college? What are you going to take? It doesn't sound like you struggled with that at all. Like you already had a focus. Or did you ever have any waiver at all when you started university and you started studying sports science?
Yeah, my folks were pretty keen on obviously me studying something that was going to be useful and lead to a career. And actually, sports science wasn't top of the list. It was they've were sort of pushing me towards physiotherapy, because I was interested in human body and that sort of stuff. They were
Yeah.
also pushing me potentially towards sports journalism because I'd always tended to do well with English literature and writing,
Mm-hmm.
that kind of stuff. That felt like it flowed quite naturally for me. So I explored a couple of those type of things. I did some work experience working with physios in hospitals. I even shadowed
Oh,
a
wow.
sports reporter on a local paper once and that kind of thing. But I just was pretty determined, I think, and they realised in the end that I just was going to go and do sports science, not because I actually had any clear idea, but that just felt like the next step that I wanted to take.
Yeah.
I can see now why, as a dad myself, and sort of looking at what I'd want for my kids, I can see why that was potentially a bit daunting for them, and it probably wasn't in many ways a sensible decision because there were very few jobs and a lot of people coming out with that qualification, but it was what I wanted to do, and at that
Yeah.
point no one was going to tell me any different.
Yeah, for sure. So how has that affected your parent style? How old are your kids, I guess, obviously first?
They're still pretty young, 7 and coming up 10. So they're still a little ways away from, having to make decisions about that.
Yeah,
But it's something that I now think about, because I think my mum and dad were brilliant in the way they gave me a lot of support, but a
yeah,
relative amount of freedom,
yeah,
and kind of let me figure it out. It actually probably was relatively a brave thing for them to do, I guess. Now I see it from the other side, because
yeah, for sure.
of course my instinct is I want to know, to a degree. I know it's not rational, but I want to know exactly what my kids are going to do,
Yeah,
and that they're going to do great. And I want to sort of,
yeah,
set them up for success.
yeah.
Yeah,
So,
it's tricky.
yeah, I'm sure that is tricky. I don't have any children yet. I'm 31. A lot of my friends are starting to have kids now, and it's interesting to see how I guess the brain responsibility, but also just the values seem to change once you have a life that you're responsible for that you've helped to create. Which leads me to a
Mm.
question I would love to ask: what is the hardest and the best part of being a dad?
The hardest part for me personally is dealing with the the tension that comes between trying to still do loads of other things really well, and also having the time and the mental headspace to give enough attention to your kids.
Yeah.
That is a battle. I
Mm-hmm.
found it really difficult when the kids were tiny, um, and didn't always do a brilliant job with the balance there, because I was trying to grow a business, and because I
Mm-hmm.
was still trying to pursue my sport to an extent, and maybe sometimes didn't get that balance right. But my wife's been my wife's been brilliant. She threw herself into, the kind of the responsibility of being a mum 100%, and I've learned a lot from her example, really.
Yeah.
And she's now starting to get her career back on track, because she's got a bit
Good
more
for her.
time, because the kids are freer, and yeah, it's been good for me. And that what's been great for me recently is I've traveled a lot with work in the last
Mm-hmm.
few years, and she hasn't, but in the last couple of years she started traveling again with her work, and of course that puts the emphasis back on me to be solely in charge at
Yeah.
home some of the time. And that's if you don't lean into that, it's a nightmare. And if you do, it's a really rewarding thing, to be putting the kids first for a week or two at a time.
Yeah.
100% is actually really a good thing.
Yeah, for sure. So the greatest part of being a dad in your experience?
Oh, there's so many. It's you just the funniest things that your kids say, that sort
Yeah.
of just they just sometimes they surprise you. Honestly, a soppy one is that quite often they're still young enough, they come running down in the morning, you hear their feet pattering downstairs.
Yeah.
We've got a house where our bedroom is on the ground floor and they're on the first floor,
Okay.
and you hear them pattering down the stairs, and they hop into bed, and it's absolute gold.
Yeah. That's awesome. I remember
except if
doing
you
that as a
except if
kid.
you're except if you're asleep and they jump on your head.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Do they have a time that do they wake up at like the crack of dawn like most kids do and like, okay, let's get the day going?
Yeah, yeah. So my son is pretty metronomic between
Yeah.
5:30 a.m. and 6 a.m. He's that.
Hmm.
But to be honest, I'm pretty good with that. That's also me.
Yeah.
He's got whatever the gene for that is from me. My
Yeah.
daughter's a lot more variable.
Hmm.
But yeah, my son, if you need to set your watch, use him as a guide.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. He's the younger or the older?
He's the older one.
He's the older one, 10. Okay, good deal.
Yeah.
I remember when I turned 10 and it felt like such a big milestone because you're getting to double digits. So it's interesting to hear about that a little bit.
Yeah.
So I'm curious with starting Precision Fuel and Hydration, and I'm assuming because you're an entrepreneur and you mentioned one other business, there's been an entire journey there. Talk me through a little bit how that has affected, and I guess in it looks like a positive way, like your marriage over time. Because I know from past entrepreneurs, like the divorce rate is super high because there's a lot of stress. Like you said, there's travel, and then you're obviously a professional athlete at part of the time. What has that journey been like?
It's growing a business from scratch without we haven't taken any external funding. We've bootstrapped the business from day one, really. It's
Yeah.
been the hardest thing I've ever done, bar
Mm,
none. And it's tested me to the full. I've only got as far as I've got with it because I've got a fantastic business partner, and now a fantastic bunch of people who work in the business, who are absolutely genuinely out there, like crushing it every day. And also because my wife's been extremely supportive of the
Yeah.
concept. When she met me, I was kind of already doing my own thing, and I was running my own business, so she kind of knew what she was getting into to an extent. But at every point, she's allowed me to throw myself into this, and she's been cognizant of the risks, and we've talked about the risk, the financial risks, and the time, and all the rest of it. But I've been really well supported.
Yeah.
So if you've got that support, if you're able to, I feel like I could take the calculated risks, and people around me were there to sort of like, not fully catch me if I fell, but basically they were gonna make it easier. They were gonna give me the space to be able to do it. Then
Yeah.
I could do it. So I've been fortunate that my home life is resilient like that, and I know, because I can imagine the pressure that it's put on my home life. If you didn't have a resilient relationship, it
Yeah.
would easily fold under the kind of pressure that you get from trying to grow a business.
Yeah, for sure. So, how did you meet your wife?
Online, actually.
Oh, okay, nice.
Yeah,
Is this
yeah.
the
There's
days
a
before Tinder or?
well before. Yeah, this is like this is quite a few years, when it was actually quite almost like a bit of a, I'm not going to say a
Taboo?
weird thing, but it was definitely nowhere near as common as it is now. But we both met when we were in our close to 30 or
Okay.
thereabouts, or just maybe just over, and um, sort of had come out of other long-term relationships separately, and there
Yeah.
was a website called Fitness Singles, so it was for
Okay.
people who are into sport and that kind of thing. And yeah, we went out on mountain biking on a date, and then
You get to know
that was
somebody.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was all good. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
yeah. That's beautiful. So, talk to me a little bit, or a lot a bit, about the precursor to precision fuel and hydration, and then up to like kind of the formulation and birth of that idea, I guess, with your co-founder and how that kind of moved forward.
yeah, went out. So I studied this sport and exercise science degree at university. I was fortunate to get a placement year, which is where you take a year out in your third year and you go and work in industry. And I
Hmm.
worked for a Formula One racing team, looking after the sports science aspect of their
Which
human
team, I have
performance
to ask?
center. There was Benetton F1.
Okay.
So
Nice.
they then became Renault, and there's been
Yeah.
subsequent iterations. But
Yeah.
they're one of the big teams really at the time.
Yeah.
They were, and I was really fortunate to get that placement. I ran the sports science lab for them, and they offered me a job when I left college. So was really fortunate to kind of transition straight from. I think I was one of probably only three or four people out of my entire year that graduated who went straight into a job in sports science.
Yeah.
And I did that for a couple of years, and I decided I made probably a bit of a bad decision at that point to go and work for a sort of management company that was working with Formula One drivers, and it turned out not to be a great move. It was not a good company. It was very
Cutthroat.
difficult, and I ended up leaving that relatively quickly, and I couldn't go back to what I was doing with the team. So
Ugh.
I ended up setting up my own coaching enterprise with a friend of mine that I'd studied with at university. We started coaching some motorsport athletes as well as some triathletes, because we were both triathletes. We started running training camps. We set up a little sports science lab, and
Okay.
that led to us getting a contract eventually with Porsche Cars, the car manufacturer in the UK, to build a human performance center, or to spec and run a human performance center for them at one of the racetracks. So that was then kind of, I was back almost doing what I was doing for the F1, but this was more under my own,
Yeah.
I was
You owned it.
under my own steam. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We were still, we didn't own our premises, and we didn't know, but we were a business entity that was
Yeah.
kind of driving what we were doing, which was kind of interesting, because I never set out to do anything. I didn't have an ambition to particularly be entrepreneurial or self-employed or anything. I was just figuring out what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
And then the journey to then precision fuel and hydration was that I ended up doing some sweat testing in the lab that we set up at the motorsport center, and finding that really interesting. It was something that had really helped me at the tail end of my triathlon career.
Yeah.
and it didn't seem to me like it was a service or a product that was particularly well commercialized. So
Mm-hmm.
we started to sell that service. We worked with the manufacturer of the equipment, and they saw an opportunity. The equipment we use for sweat testing, and we still use today, was originally developed for the diagnosis of cystic fibrosis,
Oh,
and so
interesting.
that's obviously a niche. That is a it's a
Yeah.
pretty it's a pretty big business globally, but it's a niche. And
Yeah.
they thought, if this guy thinks we can take this kit and credibly use it in the world of elite sport, then that's kind of an interesting angle. So the company were very supportive in saying to me, why don't you set up a business to distribute and sell our equipment into sport? And that was the earliest iteration of what is now Precision Fuel and Hydration. So we
What
set that
year is
up.
this?
This is about this. These conversations started about 2009, and we ended up
Okay.
incorporating a company in 2011.
Okay.
And then for me, it was kind of the we realized pretty quickly that selling the sweat testing hardware, offering sweat testing as service was interesting, but it wasn't enough. It didn't offer enough potential at that point to float a whole company off it. So
Yeah.
what people were interested in was taking recommendations on what sports nutrition products, particularly what drinks they should use on the basis of this
Yeah.
testing. So at that point we raised some money just from a small group of us to develop our own drinks products. And at that point, it was then definitely okay. Well, we've got to set up a company and we've got to start to
Yeah.
run this, like more like a startup.
Yeah.
And for the first, so from 2011 to probably almost 2015, I was in on a decreasing basis running the sports science lab,
Yeah.
but gradually transitioning into precision hydration as
Yeah.
that company sort of started to take some tentative first steps.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm curious. I want to go back just because it's so interesting, and I had no idea. With like when you got your first job, I guess in the performance lab with Formula One, and then kind of looking at the triathlon world or endurance sport world that you're affiliated with now, probably more heavily, I would assume. What is the difference like in culture of community? Because I know triathlon has such a deep seated, almost like religious context to the community. Is that the same in Formula One?
F1's way more, the sport of F1, or when you're on the team side of it, it's a business, it's a full
Yeah,
on commercial business, and it's all
yeah,
about performance and winning. It's full of egos, it's very high powered. Um, there was kind of this saying that they used to have at the team when I started, when if you wanted to do something and they would just make it happen, and it's like, yeah, this is F1.
yeah,
You can. We got the. It's like this. A bit like saying that this is NASA or something like
yeah,
that. We can do this. We got the budget, we got the people, and it was
yeah,
it was a very it was a really cool and exciting environment to work in, especially for a young guy, especially with someone with no kind of family commitments and stuff. There was a lot of travel for me. I was away from home a lot.
yeah,
It was full on. It was intense. It was exciting. You were definitely mixing with glamorous people in glamorous places. There
yeah,
was a lot of money. Not for me, but in the sport in general.
sure,
Whereas triathlon was, yeah, way more, yeah, totally different
yeah,
community, totally different vibe. At that point, when I got into triathlon in the mid 90s or whatever, really was a small sport,
yeah.
and it was totally different bunch of people.
Yeah. So the reason I asked that question is because I follow F1, obviously probably not as much as you do, but like I would say average. And what
Yeah,
you expressed, kind of with the glamour, the high stakes, lots of money, ego, winning at all costs type of a thing. What I've started to see in triathlon, and I love triathlon, and I think it just kind of happens. And I'm curious to see if you agree with, as triathlon grows and things get faster and more money comes into the sport, do you think that it's going to end up on, let's just say in 30 years, that same level of like, it's about egos, it's about glamour, it's about winning at all costs, and you kind of lose that community aspect to a degree?
it's it can lean. It certainly has, and it will lean increasingly in that direction. But I don't think it'll ever go anywhere near the level of it. I don't think there'll ever be quite that. Maybe there is the money in it, but it's more distributed. I think
Mm-hmm.
the critical difference, obviously, is that the participants. There's kind of a the, Formula One is in no way a participation sport, apart from
Yeah.
the 22 guys or whatever that get to have a go. The rest is it's entertainment. It's way more like NFL or
Yeah.
MBA or something like that. Whereas in triathlon, the community, the passionate community, are usually, heavily engaged in participating in the sport themselves, and I think that just brings a different dynamic. But what I have seen is that triathlon is way more of a business than it used to be. You
Yeah.
look at things like the PTO
Yeah.
and Ironman and the one-upmanship that's going on there, where people are trying to kind of get some kind of control of the sport, or trying to establish professional tours where athletes earn really big money. It's all progress, and it brings with it lots of potential good things, but it does change the dynamic. I did
Yeah.
have a conversation with an elite athlete that we worked with the other day, which I reflected on afterwards, because all the conversation was entirely around, I was trying to figure out what races they were doing for the remainder of the year and all that kind of thing. And it was, at no point did they talk about what races they wanted to do or places they wanted to go and like experiences they wanted to have. It was all about ranking points and money.
Yeah.
That was what the entire conversation was based around. And
Yeah.
I'm not saying that in a judgmental way, or even that I necessarily think that's sad or anything like that. But for me, my experience of doing triathlon was at a lower level anyway. But
Yeah.
it was way more about going to cool places, doing cool things, like, oh, I want to do this race in this
Yeah.
country. And that's kind of almost an excuse to go and
Yeah.
do that and have a vacation and visit. And
Racecation. Yeah.
yeah. And I guess at the age group level, people still doing that. But at the
Yeah.
pro level, it's become, yeah, considerably more serious.
Yeah, yeah. It's super interesting. Thanks for giving your opinion on that. So going back to precision fuel and hydration, talk to me. You said it's tested you to your absolute limits. Were there moments, and I'm sure there were, where you almost had to close the doors, like you were considering, hey, maybe this is it, like maybe we're done? Did you have any of those moments?
Yeah, a lot of them around the sort of 2015, 2014 through 2016, we were constantly teetering on the edge of running out of money. We had shareholder fallouts from the sort of small group of people that had helped to seed the business. So we Johnny, my current business partner, my business partner now, he and I bought a group of people out, and it was quite difficult. Once we'd bought them out, we found no one had hidden anything from us, but there were some wrinkles in the finances of the business that were not beneficial to us, and it sort of put us in a
Mm,
very vulnerable position. I actually remember saying to Johnny at one point, we were running this business out of a wooden shed in my garden at the time. I remember sitting in the shed and I was in tears. I had my head in my hands and I said, "I'm really sorry, mate. I think I've like dragged you into something here, which is not going to end well at the moment. This does
yeah,
not look good." And that happened quite a few times. But then we nicknamed it the business that would never die, because it was always like it was on life support at times. And then suddenly, when you were ready to like turn the machine off at the wall,
something happened.
something would drop in. Like one time, it was we got a huge order. We managed to negotiate a huge order with a Major League Baseball team for the season, and we managed to convince them that to pay for the entire order on day one in kind of March.
Mm.
And without that cash flow, we would have run out of money undoubtedly, and they just sent us a check in the mail, and that was
Wow,
that.
that's wild.
And that changed the game. We were
Yeah,
back in the game all of a sudden,
yeah,
and you kind of then you pick yourself up and you go, that was close, and then you
yeah,
carry on. And
yeah, yeah, yeah. Is
yeah,
it confidence instilling when each time you go through one of those cycles? Because it sounds like you've been around the wheel a few times now.
at the time, no, it's like genuinely terrifying,
Yeah,
and
every time.
yeah, every time. But we call it, we have a phrase for it. It's called stress inoculation, and
Okay.
it's like taking the vaccine for stress. You take the hit in the arm, and you want just enough that it kind of galvanizes you, so it teaches you that, okay, well, this didn't kill us, and if that didn't kill us, then maybe whatever's next won't kill us. And we joke as well around the fact that if everything for at a moment in time seems really pretty good, you're on the right trajectory and all the rest of it, you're just kind of between problems.
Yeah,
You've just got over the last problem, and you're waiting for the next one. You don't know when it's going to come from, what it's going to be.
yeah,
And that is definitely, well, I suppose that's life as much as it is business. But it's given us, I think, we try not to have as knee-jerk reactions as we used to. We try to take things in our stride. Johnny is very is very good. He's got a cool head a lot of the time. He will we can slow down, dispassionately talk about something. He's
Yeah.
very good with spreadsheets. Often problems in businesses can be are best articulated or viewed through the lens of a spreadsheet
Yep.
because, so he'll bang out a spreadsheet, we'll do some forecasting or modeling or whatever, or we'll look at the best and worst case scenarios, and then
Yeah.
you can kind of take a deep breath and move forward. And I've learned a lot, even though Johnny's considerably younger than me. I've learned a lot from him in that regard.
Yeah, for sure. What is the age of you and Johnny comparatively?
I just turned 45,
Okay.
and Johnny's just over 30.
Okay, nice. I hope when I'm 45 that I have hair as cool as you. I was expecting you to come on with long hair because that's some of the pictures I got, but I guess this is relatively recent.
I just had all my hair cut off, yeah, the other day, actually. Yeah, I was
Yeah.
getting a lot of stick from the people at home.
Yeah, really.
They
That's
said I
funny.
was having a midlife. They said I was having a midlife crisis. So at that point, I had to take action.
Yeah, for sure. Have you bought any motorcycles or crazy cars? Are you having any sort of a midlife crisis, you think, actually?
No, I've actually sold. I did have motorcycles, and I sold them
Really?
quite a few years when the kids came along. I was never big into it, but I did it. I do enjoy riding motorcycles,
Okay.
and I actually drive like a six-seater. It's not quite a. It's not a minivan, but it is. It's not what you would call a minivan, but it is. It's a van. It's like a.
Yeah.
It's the same thing over here. It's a smarter version of what like a tradesman or a plumber or a
Yeah.
electrician or something would drive. So I'm keeping it pretty real on that front.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. You plan on filling it with more little ones, you think, or are you done?
No, we're done now, mate.
Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah. Yeah. Two's good
Yeah, for
for
sure.
us.
Yeah. Good deal. So with Johnny, was he a part of this, your partner from like, I mean, not necessarily day one, but has he been there? Is he considered co-founder on that level?
Nigh on day one. So Johnny basically was the first guy who came along and worked at a trade show that literally when we launched, pretty much when
Okay.
we launched the products. And he was a friend of my cousin's. He was an athlete. He's a very good athlete. He was a world silver medalist in kayaking, marathon
Oh,
distance kayaking.
that's
So
sweet.
super athlete, was just a brilliant salesman actually on the trade stand and that kind of thing. He and I hit it off. We got chatting. He came and very quick we became fast friends.
Sure.
There was a lot of, and I was actually at that point was looking for someone. The guys that helped me set the business up were very supportive people, but they were also kind of busy and involved with other things and weren't necessarily able to give me the day to day support of like mucking in with me that I needed to get
Mm,
the business going. And Johnny was there, and he was that guy, and he rolled his sleeves up, and I think it excited him. He was on a different journey. He was studying engineering and was starting to work. He was starting to work in kind of a design studio, designing parts for mining machines and that kind of stuff. Like,
wow. Yeah.
kind of, if you're into that, probably a good job. But he has a huge amount of, whether he probably didn't realize it, but he has a huge amount of entrepreneurial flair, a lot of
Mm,
drive, very versatile guy. So we concocted this kind of, over time. It just evolved that we were in this together, you know.
yeah.
And so when the opportunity arose for us to buy the other shareholders out of the business, consolidate it, and kind of move forward as a unit, it was a no-brainer for us.
Yeah. Did you find it easy or extremely difficult or in the middle as you grew and realized that, okay, I'm a leader of this company. I'm responsible for, in the beginning, everything, I guess, but you're moving into hiring and you're trying to figure out products and everything else. How has your leadership style been tested, changed, and grown over time?
You'd have to ask the people that are in the company to get a really true answer on that.
Yeah.
I'm quite, I don't know how to describe my leadership style. What I would say is that I've found it difficult over the years accepting that role. I'm the CEO of the business, so I'm the sort of de facto leader. But the way we operate and the way I operate with Johnny in particular, but also Dave, who's our marketing director, is it's a very flat structure. You know, Johnny makes we're all intrinsically involved in the big decisions. Johnny and I probably talk on the phone if we're not together. If we're together, we talk every few minutes of every day, and if we're in different places, we talk on the phone 5 or 6 times a day. It's
Mm-hmm.
very like it's a partnership
Yeah.
really.
Yeah.
On that side. In terms of leadership, that's definitely something that's evolving. I think Johnny, Dave, and I, as what you might call the senior leadership team in the business, we all have very different styles, and I think that helps. Like Johnny can be very, in a good way, very direct and to the point, and very um, sort of, if someone, he hates me flagging this a lot of the time, but if someone owes us money, I'm happy to phone them up and like get the money off
Yeah.
them. But he's better at it. He's the guy who phones you up if you owe us something, or needs to negotiate something. He's got a
Perfect.
very strong sense of he's got a very confident air, rightly so. And he's like, I sometimes I can be like that. I think my leadership style is probably a little bit more, try to stand back a little bit and guide and help. And I think I'm a good motivator maybe as well.
Mm.
In terms of, I often feel like the biggest role that I bring these days to the company actually is in looking at the direction, like really looking at, as understanding where we're going with product, where we're going with strategy, where we're going with the tone of voice that we're using,
Yeah.
where we're going with the look and feel of what we're doing, or
Yeah.
that kind of thing. It's that stuff. And I suppose the how that relates to the leadership style is finding ways to get people to sort of buy into that vision and start pulling it together.
Yeah.
That's where the relationship between me, Johnny, and Dave has been very strong, because those guys we're able to sit down and distill a lot of the stuff that's sort of swirling around in my head and actually put it into a plan of action,
Yeah.
and then
Yeah.
go and deliver it. So it's a good team.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure. How big is the overall team of Precision Fuel and Hydration now?
Around 30,
30.
give or
Okay.
take. Depends. That's a lot of full-time employees. Some of those, we've got some part-time contractors, and
Yeah.
it's usually around about 30 people at the moment.
Yeah. For sure. How do you process through those? I guess we can say emotionally, maybe not so much emotional, but stressful times when and now I would assume you're not like, oh, teetering on the edge of bankruptcy anymore. It's different stresses. How do you deal with those things?
Usually, so one of the things that I try and do a little bit more now, my wife might argue differently, but as I try and leave those a little bit more at work, and compartmentalize and deal with them. Although I do come home some days, or I go to work some days feeling like the sky's falling down,
Mm-hmm.
you kind of, like we are talking about before, you get that level of experience that says actually it's probably not actually falling down, just kind of feels like it. And what you've actually got to do is break it down into a bunch of jobs and start crunching away at them.
Yeah.
Um, I'm a big one for the kind of the problem shared is a problem halved. So a lot of what Johnny and I do during a day is work through whatever problems, big or small, we've got, divide them up, decide how we're going to tackle them, and make sure we've got each other's back. It's that constant, iteration towards, working through your list, prioritizing, just putting one foot in front of the other. Like
Yeah.
there's it's not very, the way, in my experience with what we've done anyway, there's huge analogies between being an endurance athlete and being a business founder, or a
Mm.
business owner, or a business leader, in that it's the majority of it is just doing good stuff that isn't really that recognized or rewarded, but gets done over and over. Consistency, like putting one foot in front of the other, going running every day for a long time. You don't see the results very often, and then
Yeah.
and sometimes you make big surges in performance gain, and sometimes you actually take steps backwards. You get injured, or you make a bad business decision and lose a load of money or whatever. But it's not very sexy. You just got to keep plugging away.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure.
Don't lose sight of the
The end
don't
goal.
lose sight of the long term end goal, whatever that is. Keep your eyes on that.
Well, what is that goal for you?
Well, that is a good question. At the moment, that evolves, because every year we sit down and we talk about what do we want from the business, as well as what can we do for the business. And
Mm.
a lot of the time, actually, my focus has shifted away from sort of having purely business-based goals. We have business-based goals
Sure.
based on growth and that sort of thing. Increasingly, the goals are shifting towards, like a huge one is like being a great place to work. We want the company to be a great place to work because A, that's just satisfying and gratifying for everyone involved. But B, I think then you stand way more chance of being overall successful because you're going to have a bunch of, if you've got good people, they're going to do their best work when they feel happy and motivated.
Yeah.
So it's that being, I, if you wanted to distill that, it would be that if I was a fly on the wall and could hear what people work here say when they go home on an evening, or when someone says to them, we all have those meetings like, oh, okay, who are you? What do you do? What do you work for? Oh, do you enjoy,
Yeah.
is that fun? Do you like that? And I would love for people to say, yeah, it's the best job in the world. That would be great.
Yeah, for sure. So that kind of leads me to a question like, what is your greatest sense of fulfillment?
Um, Greatest sense of fulfillment personally these days is genuinely when you see your kids like do well at something, excel at something, when you see them be really proud of something they've done,
Yeah.
because that's what they build their confidence on, and that's what's going to allow them to go on and you know do great things or whatever.
Hmm.
That's when you see them stand on their own 2 feet and do something and they go, yeah, that's like awesome. When we were on holiday in Spain a couple of weeks ago, it was quite windy, quite the sea was quite rough, and we go to this same place a lot on holiday, and there's a buoy anchored out in the sea. It's probably only 70 or 80 meters out, but it's quite daunting. The sea's deep, it's dark, it's wavy, and
Mm-hmm.
when he was about 8, my son swam out to that with me, touched it, and swam back in. And we've always sort of, and my daughter's now 7, and I said to her when we were there, I said, when Bobby was 8, he swam out there and touched that and swam back in. And like, if you did it this year when we're here, you're only 7 and you'll beat your brother by a year. How do you feel about
Yeah.
that? And she was a bit unsure, but then she actually came to me on the beach and said, I want to do that. So we went in and we did it, and it was choppy and it was tricky and it was difficult, and it was really quite a challenging thing for her to do. And then you get in on the beach, and yeah, you get a massive rush of like pride, basically, or
Yeah.
when you see something like that.
Yeah. Good deal. That's really neat to hear. I look forward to having kids even more. I hear some of these stories, and it's just like keeps feeding the fire. My wife's going to be
Oh yeah,
graduating
but
soon, so
that there is the Instagram version of having kids. The reality
yeah,
is like, yeah,
messy
yeah,
and yeah,
you'll be up to your elbows in substances and that you didn't want to be touching and that smell
nice.
awful, and yeah,
Yeah,
you won't sleep much. And I could definitely do the anti-sales pitch as well at times.
yeah, for sure. No, yeah, it's all part of it. So who is like your number one mentors, or maybe you have a few group of people that you kind of go to bounce ideas off that you would consider wise and give guidance and discernment?
So there's a guy who works with us called Sean O'Mahony, who started off wanting to, years ago, he was interested in distributing our products in Canada. And I immediately felt like I sort of, if I wouldn't say I necessarily immediately clicked with Sean, but what I felt was that I thought this is a smart guy. This is a guy that I want. I was drawn to him because he's a real sharp guy
Yeah.
and a lot of fun and a kind of experienced businessman. I think Sean's coming up close to 20 years older than me, but he's started and built some businesses, and but just as he is an example. He's in his 60s. He's fit as a fiddle. He's
Mm,
sharp as a tack. He's someone that when tricky situations occur, myself or Johnny or both of us will usually, he's the first guy you pick up the phone to.
yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's good to have those people. Have you ever struggled with ego as you've grown? Thought like, oh man, I got this. Look at me, or like that internal feeling of like, I think I've got this figured out, or
I think most people do. I think when I was younger, I'm embarrassed by sometimes, maybe I did, certainly when I had a little bit of modest success as an athlete in sport or whatever, then
mm,
I definitely acted in an egotistical way around that. And it, you know, hopefully that's, well, I think that has got better over the years.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's definitely, I try not to be. I almost think sometimes the opposite can be true. The kind of imposter syndrome
Yeah.
can take hold when you're growing a business and having success, and when you get thrown into new situations where you feel a bit out of your depth at all times. So it oscillates.
Yeah.
And I think over the years it's oscillated wildly from like, you need to be overconfident or ignorant to start a business, really, because you know it's going to be an absolute shit fight, really, and
Yeah.
you're going to sign up for it. You're not, if you knew what was going to happen, you wouldn't probably
Yeah.
willingly sign up for it.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you also then need to kind of, you do need to oscillate between being extremely confident in what you can achieve and do, and also humble and
Yeah.
leaving your ego at the door enough to listen to other people occasionally and learn some lessons.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. There's definitely balance there. Something I've been trying to figure out as of late is, like you're saying, there's this oscillation, and I see on one side it's like very egotistical, and I can do this, I've got this, and I would consider that a portion of selfishness. But then you've got the other side where it's like, oh, I can't do anything, I'm terrible, blah blah blah. But it's still another form of selfishness. So like trying to figure out where that center line is and how to balance that with like what you're saying is. I don't think anybody's actually figured it out, and I'm not sure any of us will before we go to our grave. But it's something to think about.
Yeah, I often think that in those dimensions and in others, people obviously for whatever reason, genetics, experience, upbringing, have a leaning towards like one way or the other. We've all met people that are like horribly overconfident all the time, and
Yeah.
overconfidence or confidence can get you a long way in a lot of situations, but it does have its limits, and it can be a real, and it can also be a real, it can hold you back as well. But at the same time, if you're not confident, it's clearly a handicap if you can't back yourself,
Mm.
and sort of, yeah, finding that and understanding whether, I think I oscillate between a lack of confidence in certain situations and overconfidence in others. And over the years, hopefully those oscillations
Yeah.
become smaller, and you end up a little bit more with an understanding of, really, like, there's that psychological construct called the Dunning-Kruger curve, and I don't know if you've ever
Mm.
heard of that, but
I've heard
it's,
of the Dunning-Kruger effect,
yeah,
but I
sorry, the
can't remember.
Dunning-Kruger effect, but it's the curve is the sort of graph that shows that when you're on the far left-hand side of the graph, then your confidence is like super high, but it's because your knowledge and ability is
Yeah.
really low, and you kind of don't know what you don't know. And as you get more experienced and more competent, actually what happens is your confidence decreases, because you kind of realize that most things are complicated, and you know what you don't
Yeah.
know. And only if you kind of come out the other side of that with some genuine expertise and experience do you have a more, do you start to approach the optimum area, which is like where you've got a level of confidence which is compatible with your actual level of knowledge and ability.
Yeah.
And we talk about that at work all the time, because you often find you interact with people who are all over that curve.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, you tell them about experiences, and you can share all this information, but do you do anything practically to kind of get people on that balance or to make steps toward that?
I At work, yes, we talk about that stuff all the time. We and I buy tons and tons of books for people to read at work. I read a huge amount of literature. So if I come across good books, then the next thing that will happen is 6 copies, 8 copies
Yeah.
will turn up in the office, and I throw them around and I say, look,
Yeah.
read this book,
Yeah.
and we just try, because for me, there's two things that I believe are really fundamental for like really developing people. It's reading and traveling. You
Yeah.
know, those two things teach you a hell of a lot.
Yeah, it's interesting you say travel. I went to a foreign country, to India, for the first time when I was 9, and that had the greatest impact. I don't think I was even old enough to truly realize all of the lessons that I was kind of storing away that I would think back on when I got much older. But yeah, it's interesting with travel. And I guess it's because of culture. I don't really completely understand it. Like, it's just a different approach to life and thinking. But
I
yeah,
think it's also self-sufficiency, and you have to switch on when you're traveling, because especially if you're traveling on your own, especially if you are traveling
yeah,
somewhere new and different, there's often you've got to look after your own safety, you've got to look after your own logistics. When we send young people in the business on the road, it's very revealing
yeah,
as to how they cope with that.
yeah, yeah. It's interesting. I'm curious really quick because we have about 8 more minutes.
Yeah.
Um, I'll actually switch the question.
Go for
Analytics.
it.
So
Yeah.
whenever you are like checking, I assume that maybe you have some form of on your phone where you can check kind of sales numbers or traffic or what's our marketing channels doing or whatever. Do you, I guess, first question, do you have that? And two, do you check that all the time?
Yeah, I get a daily, everyone in the company gets a daily KPI email, which looks at revenue and traffic and or a lot of useful e-commerce statistics. And I look at that every day. Um, Outside of that, when we build or change things, there's a level of analytics that goes on, and I get those high level numbers for things like cash flow. We do monthly forecasting. I've tended to, so this is where Johnny comes into his own, and Dave. These guys are data driven, analytical. I'm a lot more um, I'm a lot more sort of gut feel, but
Mm-hmm.
I keep a track on the numbers. There's a running joke in the office that one of my skills, if you like, is that I can estimate pretty any number that's related to the business within 10%. Like if and a lot of other things. It's kind of I've always found it really useful. We call it the Fermi guesses, which I think the famous Fermi question, the original one was like, how many piano tuners are there in New York? And it
Okay.
was an exam question
Yeah.
because you have to at first you're like, well, how the hell am I going to start with that? And it's like, well, how many people live in New York? How many families? How many houses is that? How many of
Yeah.
those can realistically afford a piano? And then you kind of
Yeah. You
break it
whittle.
down, and you can start to figure out whether 60,000 is a realistic number, or 6,000, or 600, or 60. And I my if I bring a skill in the analytical side of things, I think it's basically I have the ability to look at things and go, is that about right? Is that about where that should be?
Yeah.
And if it's not, then I'll investigate a lot more deeply. But
Yeah.
I do run on a lot of instinct around roughly where things should be.
Do you find that in general also when like thinking about pricing, like if you look at an item, you're like, oh yeah, I know pretty much how much that is. Have you found
Yeah,
that to be? Yeah,
yeah,
that's interesting.
yeah,
I was always
yeah. And
shocked.
if things
Yeah.
and it's always a really interesting moment when something jars with that expectation, and that causes a bit then for you to do a little bit more analysis.
Yeah. Yeah. That's super fascinating. So in the beginning, early days, as sales are coming in, you're checking those things. Was that like an extreme, like, oh yeah, this is really awesome. I'm getting the dopamine hit from it. And then over time, it's kind of gone down and you've been able to maintain kind of what we were talking about earlier, just like this fine line of balance of, oh, I'm not going to let that affect me as much.
Yeah, I think so. I think the we spent so many years. Maybe my adrenal gland just is like totally shot now because of the amount of time it's spent
Yeah.
wide open
Yeah.
with the stress of being close to the red line. But
Yeah.
yeah, we look at the high level numbers like monthly now because we have more cash flow to manage and that sort of thing. But even then, I place a lot of trust in Johnny and the team that look into finance to make sure that we're on track with stuff and engage with it. I find that it's really useful to engage with that periodically to make sure we're on track, but it's a distraction if you solely focus on that. There's far more other important, more nuanced either metrics or subjective feedback that you can get that you have to feed into
Yeah.
decision making.
Yeah. Good stuff. Well, I know you got to run here in a second, so I have one more question. Take as long as you want, till the end if you want. What are your deepest values or truths that you hold dear?
A huge one is around really trying to treat people how in the way that you would wish to be treated yourself is probably a really big one. I've been involved with businesses and business partners in particular that where that necessarily hasn't been the case. And
Yeah.
I think one of the things that sets us apart in precision fuel and hydration is the relationship we have with our suppliers, partners, and our customers. It's like really trying to be charitable in the way that you think.
Big key.
Often customers send us mostly really good emails and but occasionally things go wrong. We ship them the wrong product because something went wrong in the warehouse or something. And
Yeah.
occasionally you can get some really quite aggressive sounding, like emails in or live chat messages into the CS team that are really, I think, quite strong, a bit too strong. But we have to. I've always explained to the guys like, take a deep breath. Imagine on your worst day how you would react to something going wrong. And that's what's happening to this person here. They're not an asshole or something like that. They're probably just overreacting badly, or they're not expecting it. And 9 times out of 10, if we go back to those people with, you know, a charitable and considered response, then we find that actually we can make everything right and everyone's happy, and it's amazing that then the response that you get back. But that kind of value of trying to treat people in a respectful way, how you'd want to be treated yourself, is fundamental to the way that we do business.
Yeah, for sure. Great answer. Great answer. Well, Andy, thank you so much for coming on and taking the time out of your super busy schedule to tell a little bit of your story, get to know a little bit of who you are. There's a lot of cool things that I'm going to be able to clip out of here just from your experience and wisdom. So looking forward to that. But again, thank you.
Yeah, no, thanks for the invite, Seth. It's really nice. I've done a lot of podcasts around the science of our products and all that kind of stuff over the years, but it's really nice to have a different type of conversation. So thanks for all your really thoughtful questions.
Thank you again to Andy Blow for coming on the podcast. Such a neat guy and so down to earth. It's always nice to meet people who are of up-teen caliber, who have a story that is super relatable. Just wanted to thank Andy again so much for coming on and sharing some of his super busy schedule with me and with us to tell his story. If you made it to this point in the episode, just want to say thank you so much. If you wouldn't mind going on wherever you're listening to this podcast, if it's YouTube, give it a like and subscribe, maybe drop a comment. If you're on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or any of those, please give us a review. It really helps the podcast grow. And if you have any questions, you can also shoot us an email to podcaststupidquestions@gmail.com. You can also go to our website to be a part of our newsletter, and the newsletter is found at stupidquestions.show. That is our website where you can be a part of an awesome community that we hope to grow, and also be on the newsletter for exclusives like giveaways and things like that. So thank you again so much to Andy, and we will catch you guys in the next one.